Hello and welcome to the Deep Sea Podcast, a punk take on a science podcast about everything deep sea, and a watery smile to everyone after the last episode. I'm Dr. Tom Lindley, curator of fishes at the National Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa. With me is the Professor Alan Jameson, Director of the Deep Sea Research Centre at UWA in Australia and lead scientist for Inkfish.
And officer of the British Empire.
And officer of the British Empire, and don't you forget it.
Do not forget that.
OBE.
Swords.
Swords at dawn. Royal swords. What you been up to, mate? You're back in the UK?
I'm back in the UK, not working, but I am working, but I'm not, but I am.
I've never known you not work.
No, it's very difficult. I'm not sure how to get in a situation where I don't work. I might have to find some cabin somewhere in the mountains, but no. Working remotely on various projects whilst in the UK, spending my spare time laying a patio and building raised flower beds out of sleepers, railway sleepers.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, a bit of deep sea, a bit of industrial gardening. Don't really care what goes in the flower beds, but they were built solid. They will survive a significant bomb blast.
Nice.
Yeah.
The treehouse I'm building is probably stronger than the house. So if we have a quake, we're probably better off going in the treehouse.
Well, what to do is just get a big bracket and attach your house to the treehouse.
It's a load-bearing treehouse.
Yeah. The treehouse is cool, though. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with deep sea, but there you go. Yeah, so yeah, still working on deep sea stuff every day without fail, one way or another.
Even when you try not to.
Yeah.
Well, on my end, first off, a thanks to the Education and Teaching Department at Te Papa who loaned me their Roadcaster podcasting deck, which is lovely. I'd been coveting it for a while and I asked if I could borrow it. So now I've got one on long-term borrow until I need it for something else. The biggest surprise of my last month has been a shark turned up. I did a curate. I did a curator of fishes. A 1.7 meter poor beagle shark washed up at a local Wellington beach. And we heard about it through Facebook gossip, basically, and some people posting pictures. And then following some conversations with the Department of Conservation and local iwi, we found ourselves trudging along a beach in the dark with a very heavy shark in a stretcher, trying to get it in a van, which is good fun. So now I've got it now. Now I've got a shark.
Trying to sling a shark into the back of a van in the dark in the middle of the night.
It looked really dodgy.
Nice.
We just bundled something into the back of a van. There was blood coming out of it. Nothing to worry about. Continue
Nothing
with
to
your
see
business.
here, officer.
Yeah.
Just science.
We met a load of the public, actually. Loads of people who come along to have a look at it. Because I like poor beagles. They're like a caricature of a great white shark. They look a bit guilty. They look a bit sort of embarrassed about what they look like. Just they've got this big head on this little stubby dwarf body.
And then what did you do with it?
Then it went in the freezer. And now I've got to decide what happens next, whether we just dissect it and keep tissue samples and record data, or if we try and make room for it in one of the big tanks, which has sort of financial implications. And yeah, it's sort of sizing up how valuable it is as a specimen and what's the best use of it. But we're uniquely kitted out for big stuff. Sort of more than most museums, we have a lot of whole things. I've also got a 3.5 meter basking shark that we've got to figure out what to do with.
Oof.
As ever, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons, so we just want to make a huge thank you to those that continue to support us and make the show happen. And this month, it is Elena. Thank you for joining the team and supporting us. And actually, this song of the month was by one of our patrons, by Slade, who have a track called The Midnight Zone. I know you're a big fan of Midnight Zone.
Well, I did take my kids to a museum exhibit in Scotland somewhere which will remain nameless, which back in, 4 or 5 years ago, I think I was involved in it somehow, but I hadn't actually seen it because I think I emigrated to Australia before it opened. And anyway, it turns out it's still on show, so I went to see it. I found at least 2 mentions of the Midnight Zone. I was mortified. And it had the black sea devil as being a quintessentially hadal fish. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, no.
It's just ugly. It must be at the bottom.
Oh, dear. Oopsie doodle.
Kids are like, Dad, will you stop criticising everything? He says, yeah, can you just relax and have fun with your family? No, this is wrong. Technically incorrect.
I know the Lego is talking, but it's pretend. Please stop, Dad.
No, it was cool. It was cool. It's just that Midnight Zone thing's just not going away. I think it's a bit time.
No, it's here to
just
stay.
Embrace it.
It's here to stay. Yeah.
And just don't ask anyone what's darker than that because they haven't thought of that yet. So don't get me started.
You might not like the answer.
Anyway, news.
Actually, our little Discord community, which you can become part of through the Patreon program, are great for gathering deep sea news and actually get a lot of stuff that I haven't noticed before. In particular, Hadal Dweller, I don't know the real name, but they go by Hadal Dweller on our Discord, is keeping us up to date with new deep sea species. So there's a new species of hound shark from the northern Indian Ocean, Iago goplokrishnani. There's some other good ones coming up, actually. It's a good month for deep sea names. There's also a new genus and species of feather duster worm from hydrocarbon seeps in the Gulf of Mexico. Sepicola viridiplumi. That is a good one. 5 new trench isopods in the Haploniscus Baliev complex, and a new Dumbo octopus, Grimblatoothus fitiana. Lots of good new stuff, and it's good to have someone keeping an eye on things as they turn up.
How unusual is it to come across a new species of shark? I like this about hound shark. I mean, these are big, right? These are not obscure little worms and stuff. That they seem to be surprisingly large, or more than I would thought, of new species of shark that emerge per year.
The annoying thing is a lot of it is quite subtle. Like, it's not that they've found a shark in a place where they didn't expect to find sharks. It's more the like, oh, actually, this is a separate species, but we've been calling them the same thing up until now. We already know the sharks here, and these ones are a slightly different color, but now we've got enough information to say that actually it's a separate species. It's not as exciting as a big one coming out of nowhere, but it certainly happens every now and then. We've got a new family of sharks last year. A piece of footage has resurfaced, actually, of divers off Japan swimming with a giant squid. So I don't know why these things sort of re-emerge and gain traction again. So the video is actually from a couple of years back. Filmed off the west coast of Japan, divers came face to face with a giant squid at the surface. One of the quotes was, "What makes this video so remarkable is that the squid appears healthy, alert, and moving with control." And I don't know what video they're looking at, because this thing is literally falling apart to my eye and seems close to death. I don't quite know what they expect them to look like when they're healthy, but
there's no way a giant squid's going to be happily frolicking around with human divers at the shallows. Right? It's just
giving cuddles.
Something's wrong.
Yeah, I was quite excited about it. I thought like, oh, but this looks familiar. And then, yeah, the actual video is a couple of years old. I don't know why it resurfaced in the recent news. But we did have an exciting one, which was the colossal squid has been seen alive in its natural habitat for the first time. So this was something I couldn't talk about on the last one. It was on the expedition after the one I was on with Schmidt Ocean Institute, and the colossal squid was filmed alive and in situ for the first time. Me and Kat were part of the SOA press conference. I'm not quite sure why I was there. There was another quite cool squid observation that I was there for. I don't know, I somehow got swept along with this one, but Kat did a really nice voiceover for the footage just to explain what's going on. And right after the press conference, me and her had a quick chat. And so this was our initial thoughts. We're back together again, Kat, because we just got off an exciting press release conference thing.
We did. It was a baby announcement.
We can talk about the thing now.
We've been building up toward talking about the thing in different stages for a long time, right? Like it's part of the same thing we've been working on for ages, but now there's a new exciting element, which is that the first confirmed footage of a colossal squid at home in the deep sea has been obtained by Schmidt Ocean, your friends Schmidt Ocean.
On the leg after ours, so we met Michelle and the sort of handover to the next expedition, let them know about what we were doing and that we're out looking for colossal. And then they got this incredible bit of footage on the way down, and we sort of sat on it for a little while so that Schmidt wanted to do a sort of press release. And there was also this period of like, is that it? Is that really it?
Yes. As with the Galatooth's footage, there was a period of like, we'd seen the initial clip of it, which was actually live on YouTube because it was dive streamed at the time, but it wasn't possible to see the exact features we needed to confirm for at least a little while. So there was a lot of back and forth. You were there for the initial looking at the footage. You commented that I was frowning at my computer a lot, which is true because I was trying very hard to see if I could see the important bits. Yeah, and then I've discussed with Aaron Evans, who is an alum of the Squid Squad and is a world glass squid expert. And yes, indeed, we could eventually make out the really critical thing, which is the hooks in the middle portion of the arms that let us know that we were looking at a really beautiful juvenile colossal squid at about 600 meters in the water column.
So the colossal squid has been filmed alive in its natural habitat. It was a littly.
It was a little tiny one. And I kind of love that for a couple of reasons. One is that I will be very surprised if we ever get incidental footage of a large colossal squid. I think they are too aware of their environment, too skittish about large, bright things. I don't think an ROV is going to bump into one, at least not one that's sort of healthy and alert. It turns out that is possible for the young ones, which is true for some other glass squids of the same size as well. And also, we, of course, have this camera project going as well to try to film colossal squid, but we were never going to see one that looked like this almost for the reverse reason, because we're trying to mimic the light signal of a really large one, which probably is not going to entice anything other than, we hope, another large one to come and take a look at it. So we would never have seen a juvenile by attempting to look like a large one.
Yeah, we were always shooting for high risk, high reward. We were always going for like adult or bust, with a very, very specific system.
Yeah, and because of how that's set up, I mean, it actually, in that configuration, it actually pretty much reduces the chances to nil that we're going to see much other than maybe a large colossal squid if they do go for it, because not very many things would want to approach the light signal of a large colossal squid in the deep sea. So we discussed, maybe trying a more general signal just to see who else is down there, because I don't think we're going to see anybody else or much of anybody else with the really specific colossal light signal.
We can paint quite a vivid picture because me and you had just stumbled through the door of an Airbnb in Ushuaia.
Yet another Airbnb in Ushuaia.
Yeah, with all of our equipment that we'd been lugging back from the Intrepid expedition.
And a weird clock that I really wanted to proofread but wasn't allowed.
Yeah, I didn't let you break the clock. Okay, so there was this quite cool clock that was stuck to the wall. You obviously get it as a kit, and then this is the first confirmed footage of a colossal squid, but we're going to argue about the clock in the Airbnb.
This is a really important detail on this.
It is.
No, it isn't. We can leave it if you don't want
No,
it.
I'm doing it now. I'm going to see it through. So yeah, obviously you get this clock as a kit and you stick it to the wall, and it's very cool looking, but probably not a native English speaker who put it on. It was probably for very much tourists like us. Some of the letters were mixed up, weren't they?
It was all great except for the word 8, which is admittedly a tricky word, was EIHGT. And once I noticed that, it was very difficult for me to not have really itchy fingers wanting to peel that off the wall and fix it. And what I'm going to say about this is the day where we got off the ship. We had dragged all of our suitcases down the pier because the ship was berthed at the end of the pier, and the air temperature was about -3 degrees with a fierce wind. So we got all of our stuff to the Airbnb. We had said goodbye to all the people. Then we also were starting to get notifications that Schmidt had seen a glass squid, right? So I'm going to channel the moment in Frozen, right? Where the kids are sticking all of the icicles in Olaf's face, controlling what we can control. I felt like I had the opportunity to control the spelling on the clock, and that was about it. But I wasn't allowed.
So it was a coping strategy, and I stopped you.
Yes, you did. But at least now you know.
I'm not sure that was coming off the wall without taking bits of wall with it. But anyway,
Yeah.
So you were having a good frown at the laptop. More and more images were coming through.
My laptop, which always has gremlins, had extra gremlins. It did not want me to get a good look at this footage. And so there was probably some bad language as well. But at the same time, this building excitement of this might be the first confirmed footage of a colossal squid. And the more I look at it, the more certain I am that it could really be that. It was an interesting dichotomy of the headspace that we were in, and this is really exciting. But also, of course, we were just at sea trying to do this, and then we hear that somebody else may have had a good go at it accidentally.
It was an emotional roller coaster.
Whatever it was beautiful. It was going to be a great talking point for deep sea animals. And if this is going to be the first glimpse of a colossal squid that the world would get, that's fantastic as well. It's not the huge lurking monster swimming through the shot, which we do still want to see, but this was going to provide some really great talking points around deep sea life and the early life stages of these things, and the fact that every observation is valuable, even if it's not the huge one the first time.
You said that on the press conference, and I thought that was a really good point to home in, because of course a lot of people were like, oh, when do we get to see a big one? When do we get to see a big one? But they would have run with that in a totally different direction. It would have been Kraken stories. It would have been monsters of the deep. And for this to be the first confirmed, and it's beautiful and it's fragile and it's an animal, not a character. It's not a trope.
Yes.
It was good because we could talk about the science without getting swept along. And the questions were actually really respectful. I think there was 25 journalists on the chat.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And they were really sort of quite clear with the science angle. And I think, as we mentioned a couple of times, I've seen a real shift in the public's demand of good reporting of science. Like they can't get away with the clickbait anymore because people are just, they know it's not true. It's working. It's working. Whatever we're doing, it's slowly working.
Whatever project somebody started to try to demystify the deep sea seems to be working after a couple of years. How interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely the podcast. I'd like to say we have a hand in it. I feel like our quotes get mentioned here and there.
Yeah, for sure. Questions outside of the press conference, that I've been receiving from media as well, have also been very interested in getting the facts right. And, I've really drilled down into some good scientific aspects of this and haven't focused on any of the sort of deep sea stuff from nightmares tropes, which I was really happy to answer those questions and try to help people get that information right, because they seem really keen to do it in a respectful and accurate way.
Nice. So we've just come off that press conference. This episode will probably go out in a couple of weeks. So people listening to this may be well aware of what's gone on, and hopefully the reporting was nice and respectful as we thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But we just thought we'd capture this little moment of coming off this press conference, being able to talk about it, just a little snippet into what it's like to be a deep sea scientist and field these kind of questions and have these kind of moments. It's a bit weird.
It was a really nice conversation among different people who were involved in it in different ways as well, right? So the PI for the cruise, Michelle Taylor, was on the call. The science director and comms directors for Schmidt Ocean were there. Aaron Evans, the glass squid expert, was there. We were there. It was a really nice group of people coming at this from different angles to share this experience and speak to kind of the complexities of getting this footage in the first place, but then also figuring out what was going on with it and then getting that word out to the public as well. Quite a few people who had been watching at the time happened to be in the room when the first confirmed live footage of the colossal squid was obtained, because it was dye streamed. That's a first in human history, surely.
Yeah, the amount of people who were there for that first.
Yes.
It was so much work for us to get there and to get these opportunities, and that people can just join. It's really, really lovely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and of course, crucially, you had a fish curator there. I still don't know why I was on, but I'm happy to be there.
And to be fair, across the last week before all of the colossal squid press stuff hit, you have had some good press stuff around your day job, your legit curational day job as well. So you're not just Squid Tom, you're also Squid Tom.
Been a very media heavy week. I was on national radio on the Friday, and then 7 Sharp, which is, I didn't realize how much it was primetime TV. So it's the light-hearted show at 7 p.m. after the news with millions of viewers. The best equivalent I can give for anyone from the UK is it's like New Zealand's The One Show. It's a little bit fun. It's a little bit lighthearted. It's been a busy week. No wonder I woke up with a migraine this morning. And I think Sean summed it up best on the Discord when he said, so if I've got this right, the specifically designed device to spot the colossal squid didn't work, but then one randomly showed up on a regular camera. So it feels like the squid are taunting you. And yeah, I'd say it's even better than that. It turned up on the very next trip, just as we'd stumbled into an Airbnb in Ushuaia with all of our gear. Kat wrote a really nice bit for the conversation. I really like this bit. While many may be amused by the idea of a small colossal squid, this footage showcases the beauty shared by many deep-sea animals in contrast to the monster hype and stuff of nightmares clickbait titles we see too often. Essentially what we've been banging on about for years now, that actually these things are very cool if you stop talking about that.
Yeah, but can we dwell more on the fact that you did actually go there looking for this thing and it was somebody else that found it?
Like the very next trip.
Yeah.
While I was still unpacking, I'd not left the country.
Can you just dwell on this a little longer? Mister, I'm going off to film the colossal squid. Go on then. Well, good luck, mate. Oops.
But it happened. Maybe I sort of gathered them in the area.
Yeah, you were the one who loosened the jar, right? And if it's somebody else.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
That was exactly it. I got it loose. At least it meant that they knew who to send the images to when they thought they might have seen it.
Yeah. That's how we just got the colossals in the mood, right? You just got them in the mood and they were like, okay. And they said, well, Tom's gone, but we're here now, so, you know.
Sorry I'm late.
Yeah, I'm only small.
For the door. You had a squinty observation, didn't you?
Yes. My guy's out on the Strakov fracture zone, which is off Recife in Brazil. They were diving and deploying gear in the fracture zones. And they've got another beautiful sequence of the bigfin squid, Magnapinna. It's not out yet. We'll put it out on Instagram and various other platforms, I think, in the next few days or weeks. It's beautiful. It's kind of the same as the last one, but from different. It's side on this time, so you get a really nice profile of it, and the whole thing's in shot. And I think it's around 3,300 meters. But yeah, beautiful shot.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. I'll put the Inkfish channels in the show notes because you're putting out some really, really nice imagery. And even if you just want to enjoy some deep sea footage, that's certainly one to follow. But you do these really nice explainer videos. So, yep, in the show notes, follow along with Inkfish. You'll see some interviews with Alan and see a lot of firsts, actually. A lot of news gets broken on that Instagram.
Yeah, I don't even have Instagram. I have no idea what's on it. I'm really bad. People just tell me stuff when I need to know, but it feels like a big deal, having to go on to an app store and push a button and download an app. Is Instagram good? I don't know.
Podcasting's where it's at, especially when we talk about what things look like.
Is it? Okay. All right.
Yeah, purely audio medium.
Yeah. All right. So the bigfin squid, it looks a tiny little squid with big ears, but very long spaghetti arms. Yeah, done. You don't need to see the video now.
There's been a paper out on Megalodon, which, as we've gone a few times, this giant shark was never a deep sea shark, but thanks to some silly reporting and some entertainment disguised as science, we get asked about it fairly regularly. New paper reassesses a few things that we do know. And the main issue is that we keep using the great white shark as a template. We keep using that body shape. It's the same with Dunkleosteus, the big armored-headed fish from the Devonian era. Like, we keep just assuming everything big is going to be the shape of a great white. So the new paper estimates that Megalodon was much more slender and longer. So actually it has gotten longer. It has gotten bigger in that regard. So 24.3 meters, weighing in at 94 tons. So huge, cruising at about 2.1 to 3.5 kilometers an hour. And they were 3.6 to 3.9 meters long at live birth. So they gave birth to live young. At least this is our current understanding. So it's nice to see something that, again, has become a little bit of a movie monster kind of thing, that get a little bit more grounded again in what we do know and the science of it.
It's Tyler Greenfield. Is it Tyler Greenfield? Has he had a pop at this yet? It's just very much his
I'll
domain.
have to check his blog. Yeah, very much so. I'm sure it cited him because he's gathered a lot of stuff on this. We should check in with Tyler, actually. We haven't checked in with him since the giant frog in... he was misquoted as saying the Loch Ness Monster might be a giant frog. Deep sea painted swell shark has been filmed alive for the first time. It's quite pretty, actually. It's got lots of blotchy markings on it. Came off the coast of East Timor, just for over 500 meters deep. And then the last thing, hovering on the cusp of deep sea, but the coelacanth, the previously thought extinct lineage of lobe-fin fishes that turned up at a fish market in South Africa in the early 1900s. Really, really cool fish. New population has been discovered, and it was actually filmed by technical divers at dives greater than 150 meters. So the coelacanth were observed at about 144 meters, and it's just cool to see people alongside this really prehistoric looking fish, and it's good to know they're out there. So this paper extends the known range. Nice to see some coelacanth. Always.
And Noah found a car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do your one, because your one was interesting.
Yeah, there was a car found. I think when Noah were diving on the USS Yorktown wreck that went down in the Battle of Midway, and in amongst poking around the wreck, they found a black 1940 Ford Super Deluxe Woody boring the markings Ship Service Navy in it. It's just a cool image of this old 1940s car sat in the deep sea covered in deep sea animals. So there you go. A car just turned up in the deep sea. That's got nothing to do with our guest today.
No, none of these sort of led...
I mean, it could be. You could argue that we haven't yet thought about what happens when cars reach the deep sea floor in the same way as we haven't yet discussed what happens when ice reaches a deep sea floor. I mean, that's a pretty thin connection between the two.
Yeah, I've got a connection.
Oh, what is it?
Cars have in-car entertainment systems, often called ice to the petrol heads.
Yep.
What else has ice but Antarctica? There you go. How's that?
It's good.
Does that do it?
It's all right. Yeah. But I guess it's also things we would normally associate being above water being found underwater. Underwater cars are not necessarily a thing.
It's multifaceted. We've nailed this.
Yeah.
We've nailed this. This is solid as a segue. I'm not editing any of this.
We've talked about deep sea Antarctica. We've talked about icebergs and all different types. And we've talked about under ice, big ice flows going out and breaking up and all this bit. But we haven't discussed what happens when the ice grinds on the deep sea floor and what it does to the shape of the sea floor and what it does to the species that live there. So there's one guy that I know that we should call. Joining us today is Devin Harrison from Kelpie Geoscience in Edinburgh, who is a glaciologist and I'm told not a geologist, because apparently if you work with gravel, it means it's not geology. So Devin, first things first, you're going to have to explain before we talk about what we're here to talk about. Gravel.
I'd more what you would say is a geomorphologist, which is like a subset of geology. It's more dealing with sediment and broken down rocks effectively. So gravel, sand, boulders, in how they're transported and placed in the environment by processes like glacial activity or fluvial activity like big river systems, or even like the wind coming, picking up small grains of debris. You build sand dunes and all this kind of stuff. But
Okay, so how small does a boulder have to break down to become a rock, and how small does a rock have to break into before it becomes gravel? This is a serious question.
And now I need to try and figure out if off the top of my head I know my grain sizes. You have like a distinct grain size of your kind of sediment material. You have like the below 2 millimeters, which you get into your fine silts and your clays. And I think you get 2 millimeters to about 10 millimeters is your sand. And anything above that is gravel until you get to about 4 centimeters, and then you get into
So
cobbles
do you get
and
people who go
boulders.
out into the field then expected to do some research, and they get there and they find that the little pieces of geology are just too small and walk away? So sorry, that's not my domain.
You do get people that go somewhere and expect to see big class maybe for like mega flooding or some like big moraines, and instead you might have loads of fine grained sediment in like a lake system, for example, and it's a totally different type of geomorphology because different spectrums of grain
So
sizes.
do you have gravel on your driveway at home?
Not anymore.
Why? What happened?
Well, the gravel went naturally, but at one point during a PhD, I was trying to work out the kind of system I was studying. And I thought it would be a sensible idea to build a small scale model by taking I was like 2 wheelbarrows full of the gravel, and I just like kind of lay them out and started like building the system on a small scale. We do take work home, but we also play a lot. And I know they say geographers like to color in with coloring pencils, but geomorphologists like to do stuff more hands-on, so play with Play-Doh.
Was this during COVID by any chance that you were building geological features in
I
your
don't think
garden?
I've ever stopped building geological
Oh, right.
features.
So the pandemic, it doesn't matter. It was
No,
just a
yeah, I
thing that
mean,
you
you
did.
go to a beach, you can, I don't know, build a moraine.
Create an oxbow lake.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing to do. I mean, you can walk down the beach and you can see a nice braided fluvial system.
Yeah.
It's not often you get to see that, and that's on a very small scale. And you can appreciate how it flows down these low plane gradient beach systems into the sea. And then you can scale it up in your head and you can think, wow, I'm studying that on a bigger scale and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing.
Excellent. On that note, what should we talk about what we're here to talk about?
Can do.
Right. So in the last few episodes of the podcast, obviously, Tom and I have been back and forth to Antarctica, as has yourself, Devin. For the benefit of the listeners, Devin was with me in Antarctica. And we spoke a lot about deep Antarctica and sub-zero temperatures and all the kind of flora and fauna and rocks and whatever, And we spoke to Shaylin Potter about different types of icebergs, and spoke to Kat about squid and all the rest of it and what happens under ice. But what we haven't talked about is what happens when you go under the ice and there is no space between the ice and the seafloor. That's the thing we want to talk about, is what effect does the breakup of ice have on the deep sea benthic system? And that's what Devin looks into. So ice breaks off Antarctica and starts moving. Continental shelf in Antarctica, I believe, is at least twice as deep as the normal continental shelf.
Yes,
Is
it's
that right?
about, in most places, you can talk maybe 700 meters to 500 meters, roughly. That's what it is around South Shetlands anyway.
How then does ice come in contact with the seafloor?
We can talk about it from multiple aspects. We can talk about it from the actual grounded ice thousands of years ago during the last glacial maximum. And then we can talk about ice in terms of what breaks off from calving events, or when you get ice shelf collapses in breakups of big icebergs, and how they'll influence the modern day seafloor. If we started it from a system scale, Antarctica itself, you've got a huge amount of it that's grounded, some of it on the continental shelf, some below sea level, and then you have your floating ice shelves, which are on the margins. So about 20 to 25,000 years ago, Antarctica was way beyond its current extent. So most of it went to the kind of shelf break. And that's what we had around the South Shetlands and the Antarctic Peninsula. So where we were about a few months ago. So where we were sailing, when you did your 2 dives, probably would have had some sort of ice shelf around there, because we weren't far from the shelf break of the continental shelf. So you would have had an iceberg floating ice shelf coming from that. So all of that would have been under ice at some point. When you've got ice on the shelf and when you've got grounded ice, as it's moving, it distorts, erodes, and deposits material on the land, and you get a suite of different landforms that give you an understanding of the processes that happened and the extent to which the ice was. So you can have something in the subglacial realms. So we're talking about underneath the ice here, things called megascale glacial lineations, drumlins, or you can get eskers, grounding zone wedges, and all these have different kind of meanings in terms of what the ice is doing or where the ice is.
But you can see these scars on maps, right? These are the things you can see on multi-beam images.
Yeah. So that's what we're seeing now. So we're seeing the former subglacial environment of Antarctica in the multi-beam, because now as the ice is retreated, it's exposed a huge amount of land that was formerly ice covered.
Yeah, so the topography of some of the deep sea around Antarctica isn't anything other than what was created 25,000 years ago by grounded ice.
Yeah, pretty much. You've got grounded ice that's created this street of topography, and then you get icebergs as the glaciers are retreating, and also now as you've got retreating calving events that are then superimposing on that previous last glacial maximum form of the seafloor and are eroding big like sinuous or curvilinear channels that are maybe tens of kilometers long, maybe 5 to 10 meters deep within the seafloor, and they're just like where you've got the keels, the bottom of the iceberg basically hitting the seafloor and getting itself stuck.
So how fast do these things travel then when they're grinding on the bottom? Presumably it's
the
pretty slow.
icebergs?
Yeah, when they're grinding on the seafloor along the shelf, it's like 700 meters deep. Surely it must be a very big, massive, slow-moving thing. Is it? What I'm saying is it faster than a brittle star can run? I'm thinking of brittle stars here.
Well, that's an interesting question. I'd imagine it can vary. I'd imagine it moves very slowly. When you consider, was it the A23A that's recently just crashed into South Georgia? I mean, that's not taken too much time in the grand scheme of things to move from the South Orkneys towards South Georgia when it's completely floating and not grounded. But when it was grounded in the Weddell Sea, I mean, it was stuck in the same area for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So on a day rate of movement, I can't be sure, but I know we kept trying to find icebergs and they would all disappear. And some of them must have been grounded in some areas of the shelf, because you were getting up to at least 200, 300 meters as we were going to Elephant Island.
Because the shelf actually provides a little bit of movement itself, isn't it? It's as the snow is falling on the continent, it is flowing, but really, really slowly. And that shelf is sort of constantly oozing out, essentially. But
as in the ice shelf.
Yeah.
So yeah, that has movement. And then most of the time that has your highest vertical movement in your glacial systems, the actual floating bit of the ice shelf, because they're fed by your big ice streams, which they're like basically big rivers of ice that come from the interior of the continent and flow out towards the coast. And they can move at about 1 kilometer a year or something like that. That's their maximum kind of like horizontal velocity, you could say. And they all come out of these shelves. So obviously the shelves are all kind of moving and then getting cut back by retreat and warm water circulation, allowing for break off of the big chunks of icebergs.
In my head, it's one of those 2p machines at the arcade.
Yeah.
Every now and then a 2p falls off and that's an iceberg.
Yeah, because you're just looking for weaknesses and failure planes, aren't you? So as soon as you've got a slight bit more stress or push in one area, and then you've got a big weakness there mixed with the kind of warm water that's upwelling and circulating under them, they're just going to fire off, yeah.
So these scars that they leave behind, even the old ones, in terms of how deep are those relative to the surrounding seafloor? Are they like tens of meters deep, hundreds of meters deep? Are they like on the same par as like upper canyons and stuff?
I mean,
like that?
in terms of the plow marks that you get left by icebergs, they can be maybe 10 meters deep. But when you think about glacial troughs that are formed by erosion from like big outlet glaciers, they can be hundreds of meters deep. So you are starting to think there about like kind of canyon scale systems.
That's interesting, because that means then the ice is carving an indentation or incising the continental shelf to the degree that tens of thousands of years later, when you have things like massive krill populations that eventually crash and sink, and things like spring blooms and phytoplankton and zooplankton and all the rest of it, that alteration of topography will create a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And you would expect it would be more biomass, I guess, possibly more diversity within the form or scars of an iceberg than there would be on the surrounding seafloor. Right?
Yeah, you'd imagine. I mean, you've got a big depot center, haven't you? It's a huge amount of accommodation space that something can accumulate in.
And I guess hard substrate as well. So you get your filter feeders, so you get your things growing up into the water.
Yeah. We see all along that kind of margin where we would just were. I mean, in all the sub footage and all the lander footage, there's at least 10 or 15 large chunks of ice rafted debris. And that's not even accounting for like the smaller gravelly to sandy size bits as well that you can't kind of accurately measure from the video footage alone.
Here's an interesting idea. We talked about this one in the previous podcast about the ice rafted debris. So the glaciers pick up mass from the continent and then it floats out, and when it melts, it drops these dropstones, right? But then surely then if the ice sheet is then grinding into the seafloor, it could potentially be picking up material, and then when it eventually unsticks, takes that material and drifts off with it and does the same thing.
That's effectively how the material gets to the end of the ice sheet or the glacier itself anyway. It's picking it up from underneath in the subglacial environments, or you get it from what we call the superglacial system. So from the above ice system. So you might get rock falls under the glaciers and the debris entrained and then spat out the other side. So yeah, if you have an iceberg that's plowing down into the underlying substrate, the idea that maybe it's picking up and entraining some of that as you get maybe some marine freeze as well onto the bottom of the iceberg, and as soon as it liberates itself, yeah, maybe you do have a small quantity of material it's picked up on the continental shelf away from where it's actually got its main source material.
Has anyone ever filmed that? Has anyone ever filmed the interface between ice and seafloor? Yeah. I'm just curious because it feels like something that's so big. I mean, when you see these icebergs up close and you realize they're like 4 or 5 stories high, and you imagine that grinding into a soft sediment seafloor at 500 meters deep. It's like,
I mean, I know there's a lot of people that have went up to like the margins of where the terminate and the terrestrial setting, and that you film the kind of the interaction between the subglacial zone and the ice there. But in terms of in the marine setting, I don't think many have.
Well, we should do that.
It would definitely be a game changer as well in terms of if you had something that could measure current speed or conductivity as well to get an idea of maybe sediment concentration of some plumes as well coming out of the big subglacial meltwater systems.
Yeah, because that's another thing it'll do. The other thing it'll do is it will completely disrupt the bottom currents. In terms of thinking the effects these have on animals, you've got historically changing topography, so you've probably got better and worse speeding conditions than it would have been without the ice. Second part is if it suddenly contacts the ice, then you better run or you're crushed. And it probably, imagine, resuspends a lot of sediment in the water column, which is probably an issue for filter feeders and whatnot. But then there's also a massive big chunk of ice that is, I don't know, I couldn't put a value to how many cubic meters of object that is suddenly introduced into an environment. That must completely screw with all the bottom currents.
The water's got to rush in to replace that. That's what we were really surprised with the ice shelf that broke off. I was ready to get there and it was all just a silty mess because that's a lot of volume to replace.
The problem is you never see these things, right? Because you've got to be there exactly the right place at the right time. Or alternatively, we go to Antarctica, the 3 of us, and we make it happen. We just put some explosives in the ice.
Or do that Bugs Bunny Florida meme where he just goes across with a saw.
Oh yeah, we could do that. Yeah, get a big gas axe,
cut a chunk of the ice off.
Yeah, see what happens. Yeah, we'll do the cutting, Devin. If you go underwater and film what happens underneath, that'll be ideal.
Yeah. You go in the path of it and just hunker down with a GoPro. We'll put a hard hat on you though. You'll be fine.
And some safety goggles as well.
Safety goggles, yeah. Knee and shin pads.
Yeah. Always got to be protected. The satellite observations, the big kind of game changer for most of the ice movement in some respects, because you can pick up from satellite data as well when you get flotation of where you've got an ice shelf and you get your grounding line. You can get flotation of the ice during the changing in the tides. So the ice sheet effectively picks up off its grounded position and then regrounds as the tide goes down again.
I always saw that as such an absolute thing, but of course it's going to be just floating and then grounding and then floating and then grounding, pulling lots of water all the way along and then squeezing it out again.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. So there's a big gap in this kind of research in terms of everybody talks when you're looking at ice melt and impacts to ice sheets and glaciers and floating ice tongues is warm water incursion. So warm seawater that basically melts the ice that it comes into contact with. And it's melting in the kind of subglacial setting, which allows effectively the glacier to retreat below and causes instability above. And then you get your calving events. But being able to quantify how much warm seawater maybe gets captured as you get this tidal fluctuation could be a massively important thing as well. Because how much seawater, warm seawater, can make it in under the ice as it's lifted up and how much stays there as it regrounds. And then the cool thing with the kind of the tidal flexure as well and the kind of flotation and regrounding is you actually get a suite of landforms from that. So you get these things called corrugation ridges, and they're basically just called that because it looks like corrugated iron on top of a like garden shed or something like that. Because that's linked to tidal motion, that shows you a daily change of the ice. So you can actually measure daily retreat rates from glaciers that disappeared 20,000 years ago based on the preservation of these ridges within the marine environment. So one of the people I've been working with actually on the South Shetland data that me and Al were out collecting, she released a good paper not so long ago about these in Norway that found up to 600 meters a day of glacier retreat, which is way beyond what's ever observed in the satellite record. I think in West Antarctica, they've seen it at like 110 meters a day. But yeah, 600 meters a day is a huge amount of ice lot.
I know people who can't even walk 600 meters a day. So on other things, I think we have to talk about the next level of Antarctica, because we're going to go even deeper sea now, right? It's been a long, complicated season in Antarctica this year, because you and I, Devin, went down for a month. I stayed down there with my kids randomly on another ship. You went home. Tom arrived at some point in that month and went somewhere else on 2 ships. And then roughly at the same time Tom was probably going on his second trip, you, Devon, were back again on the same ship. But this time we went to the Falklands Escarpment. So the Falklands Escarpment is basically a big shelf, a big wall, essentially. And this particular one, we were interested in it because we've been tracking Antarctic bottom water all through the deep sea. And it was nice to actually get to Antarctica, get right to the source of it. But where the Falklands is, there's an escarpment, which is 2,000 or 3,000 meters high. It runs from about 2,000 meters to 5 or 6 at the bottom.
Yeah.
And it runs for hundreds of miles. It's like, it runs off Argentina right past the Falklands and halfway to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And so we thought it'd be cool to go there, do a couple of subdives on the top of the shelf and a couple on the bottom. And we got 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom in the end, of which Devon did the top 2. When you think about Antarctic bottom water being this really dense, cold water mass that's spilling off on the continental shelf of Antarctica, it hits that escarpment and then drops several thousand meters and spills into the Argentine basin, which is over 6,000 meters deep and is massive. And the escarpment I thought was really fascinating because it's essentially a cold water waterfall underwater, but it's hundreds of miles long and thousands of meters deep.
When you say cold water waterfall, it's, I don't know, the current generated by the water cascading down must have been massive. We were getting thrown about in the sub. And I mean, on the first dive, I remember you were coming through the water column and all the marine snow was just flying past the window. And I'm not talking like in a vertical sense here, because obviously you're descending, but even when you stabilized and got buoyant or neutrally buoyant on the sea floor, you just had this horizontal traveling marine snow and you couldn't see out of the top 2 portholes. So you were just completely blind to the environment around you. And you'd see rat tails definitely stand out because they're trying to swim against it and they're just getting pushed further and further.
I wondered about that because we've been a few places where the current speed's been so high that you do see a fish and it's not holding station at all. It's essentially going backwards. And he's like, how long has that thing been going backwards for? So he's like, has this thing just been going backwards for like 40 years? David, what do you reckon all that material was? Is that organic material?
I'd be tempted to say it was some sort of biological matter within the water column. So either diatoms or forearms or something like that. It definitely looked like it was something related to productivity at the surface because it was all through the water column as well, right from the top all the way to the bottom.
If you are a fish and you can't hold station because the current speed around the escarpment is so high, what happens then if you accidentally go off the edge of the escarpment? Because you've got a 3,000 meter drop to find the seafloor again, or you have to swim against it.
Or you travel up with the current up towards Brazil, and then as the current brings you back down. So they're just in an endless cycle. Almost they've entered a roundabout and they don't know what a roundabout is and they can't turn out of it.
That's deep sea animal migration in a nutshell. It's just one big roundabout, but no one's got the highway
They're
code.
basically in Milton Keynes and they don't know
Yeah.
how to get out.
It's a good question, because you've got a really horribly energetic dynamic system right on the edge of a cliff. And most things at 2,000 meters, I can't think of anything that thrives at 2,000 meters will survive a vertical drop to 6,000 meters. Because if you think of brittle star, for example, brittle stars they're not going to swim against that, right? You've got this death wall.
We had that with the anemone at one point.
Oh, you didn't kick it off the
No,
side,
we didn't
did
kick
you?
it off the side. We were like, I think this was the dive with Luke, so it must have been about 3,600 meters. We were just going along, and I was so busy looking at all the brittle stars and sea stars and starfish because there was just tons of them everywhere. And all I heard Luke say was like, oh my God, what the hell is that? And after the last time Bruce did that in the previous dive and it was a Dumbo octopus, I immediately got excited. And it wasn't an octopus, but instead it was just an anemone just rolling down the slope. It tumbles in every direction as well. Where did that come from? Did it come from higher on the slope and it's been pulled off and now thrown to its death?
That's a good point, because and this is an exclusive for the podcast. So myself and another guy at work and my PhD student Alfie has just had a paper accepted about rolling anemones. So anemones can move. Last year in Nova Canton, and I think we've since seen it somewhere else, there's a particular one that's at hadal depth that it kind of sucks in its foot, for want of a better word, lies on its side and rolls across the seafloor, but it uses the two double crown of tentacles at the top as a way of gripping the seafloor. And so it relocates that way. Because for a while we're looking at it going, is that us in the sub that's moving that? Or is that the current that's moving that? But actually they were moving completely independent. So it's a whole new form of locomotion for anemone. So they can potentially look like they're completely out of control, but there might be some strategy to that, and that they've decided to move. And if the currents are seasonal or have some sort of pattern to it, maybe it is in everyone's best interest in an environment like that is to once a year just go, I'm not staying here anymore because I know what's coming, and then migrate somewhere else, overwinter somewhere else, and then come back again. I don't know. But yeah, I was really surprised that anemones are mobile.
Funny looking as well when they're rolling in that way, because it looked like a big plunger at one point.
I think it looks like a kid getting into a sleeping bag and then putting their head right inside. And you're like, yeah, it's moving. Yes, it has locomotive abilities, but it's,
For an anemone, it's impressive, but for the animal kingdom at large, no.
I mean,
Pretty
the
rubbish.
thing that surprised me actually with all of that and with all of the strong current as well was the fact that we had I think we had two or three big nodule areas as well on the first dive. And I was just a bit blown away that they were still there in that current. There's this thing with nodules where they want a little bit of current speed to blow any kind of sediment in the water column away from them so they can keep developing and forming. But the current speed that was coming down there must have been beyond that. And the fact that these were just still sat stationary on the sea floor, I just found that quite impressive.
They just nested into the mud though.
Well, a little bit, but you could tell they'd been covered on one side by sediment that's been eroded down some of the channels, but they looked like absolutely no movement. They were just perfectly stationary, whereas everything else around it was just getting thrown away. But yeah, the Falkland Escarpment was a rather unique place, I think.
There's not many places like it, right? There's not many places in the world where you can get a more or less a vertical wall of several thousand meters high, which runs for hundreds of kilometers long. It is quite something else.
Canyon systems and the gully systems that are coming off it, they're huge. And you see tracks of them as well going way into the depths, just like these subtle channels that are obviously still kind of entraining some of that current or some of the sediment flow that's coming down these systems and bringing it even deeper. So you're talking about in hardly any distance at all, material that's up 2,000 meters being transported to a 6,000 meter plus abyssal plain. It's kind of mind boggling to think of that and to think of the scale that's happening on for 150 kilometers of the entire escarpment.
The other thing I thought was interesting was of all the things we filmed in Antarctica, which was very much inside the Antarctic convergence and south of 60 and all that stuff, a lot of the stuff that you guys were filming in the Falklands Escarpment, which is considerably further up, right? It's not considered to be Southern Ocean, I guess, at that point. It's very much South Atlantic. I was always under the impression that the Antarctic species were very unique, very endemic. But looking at what you guys were seeing in the sub to what we were seeing in the sub, they could be from the same trip. So what I think is really interesting is the escarpment is like this massive jump-off point between things. Let's not bound ourselves to Antarctic convergences and 6 degrees south, whatever, but it's stuff around the polar region is this big jump-off point, and you're suddenly into the Argentine basin, which is so huge and so deep and so massive. You've got the Mid-Atlantic Ridge at one end of the Falklands Escarpment, and you've suddenly pretty much into temperate, then tropical South Atlantic. And it is a very abrupt, because it has that wall. It's not like you're going to see this sort of very gradual shift in species and stuff like that, or habitats, whatever. It's like on, off. And so, yeah, I find that whole thing was really interesting. We should go back there at some point.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that kind of natural bridge from Antarctica going through the South Sandwich Islands as well. Yeah. And like, you just have this natural pathway for all of them kind of species to move and get to the Falkland Escarpment and back to Antarctica.
This also seems a good point in the conversation to mention that you must be the deepest diving Geordie of all time.
I think so. That has been the name that has been unofficially awarded to me on the ship. So,
for the benefit of listeners who are not from the north of England, a Geordie is somebody from Newcastle and they speak like Devon.
Very well, usually.
I think at the moment, Devon is actually the deepest diving Geordie of all time, and twice as well, by the way, twice. Yeah. What other killer facts have you got on your list of killer facts?
Well, actually, that you've done quite well there bringing in Newcastle, because I did have a really nice little story that I only found out about a few years ago. My particular brand of Geordie is from Blyth, which is a small port just into Northumberland. And what I didn't realise was the person that discovered the South Shetland Islands was actually from Blyth, a guy called Captain William Smith. And he sailed a ship called the Williams, which was quite cleverly named the Williams because there was 3 people called William.
That's the best Geordie joke ever. Why is it called Williams? Because it's just full of people called William. Makes sense.
But yeah, so they built this ship in Blyth, registered it in Newcastle. I think it was in 1819. He was doing a trading route from Montevideo to Valparaiso and stopped off at Buenos Aires. And after they got from Buenos Aires, they decided to go further south around Cape Horn because they wanted to get nice winds.
Yeah.
And yeah, he spotted land at 62 degrees, 15 minutes south and 60 degrees west.
Do you think he overshot Cape Horn just a little bit there?
Well, just a fraction.
It's like 10 degrees or something.
Yeah, but I think he got some favorable winds, because he did make it to Valparaiso, so that's always good.
So why did they call it South Shetland then if it was named after from Geordies?
So what did he first call it? New South Britain. I think that was the first name he gave it,
right.
He coined it. But I feel like it got South Shetlands because I think there was resemblance to the Shetland Islands, if I'm not mistaken.
The original, the OG Shetlands.
Yeah.
They really lacked imagination back then.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a great way of naming it as well. Just, we found this island, I'll just name it after the king. Oh, this is King George Island.
The first time I went down to South Shetland, 2015, it's over Christmas, 15, 16, something like that. And at the time I was in Aberdeen, Scotland, I used to give quite a lot of public talks and stuff like that, just whatever. And this particular one was a bowling club, an old man bowling club. And I went there one afternoon and it was just back from Antarctica. So I showed what we did in Antarctica and it was all very good. And the old boys had a pint at lunchtime and it was all good. And this guy came up to me afterwards and says, like, just so you know, there's this gentleman in the crowd who I saw, he was in a wheelchair and he couldn't speak anymore. He was on lots of medical devices, stuff like that. And he's just up sat in the corner and these carer came up to me afterwards and said, this guy, just so you know, he's really excited by everything you're doing. I was like, oh, cool, that's really nice. Why? He said, well, back in, I think it was the 50s or something like that, he was on I forget what it was now. He was in a merchant or navy or expedition or something, but there's a piece of Antarctica named after him, right? And it's just after this guy in a bowling club in Aberdeen. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, he couldn't really articulate it himself, but the person was relaying the stories, and this actually really means a lot to him because you've shown all these pictures of the place and stuff like that. And somewhere there's a point or a peninsula or whatever it is, somewhere in Antarctica named after this guy. It's really cool. Humble.
I think it was in like 2019, a group within Blyth, one of them happened to be my parents' next door neighbour, got a tall ship. So it's like this old 20th century Baltic trader, because the plan was to recreate William Smith's journey from Montevideo around to the South Shetlands and Valparaiso. I think they didn't get all the funding from the lottery or something like that, but it's in not even doing the journey, they've kind of reinvigorated the community about this incredible person from Blyth.
Yeah.
He goes along many of the lists of Blyth heroes, like
yourself.
Now me, yeah. I am just the deepest diving Geordie and obviously the best person in Blyth.
Yeah. To wrap up, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, Devon. Deepest diving Geordie. Another one to add to our list of deep sea royalty to our podcast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure joining. I've had a lot of fun.
Also, I'll see you in the pub this afternoon.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
I'll be on the train.
It was nice to meet you as well, Tom, after all the many great stories.
Oh, no.
So after the interview, I got on a train and went into the beautiful town of Edinburgh, which is the best city in the world, and met Devon himself again in a pub called the Jingling Geordie. Only to find out that the Jingling Geordie isn't actually a Geordie, he was some rich bloke called George. Quite disappointing, but we had a good afternoon, and after many, many beers, Devon managed to eat a full Scottish breakfast at about 9 o'clock at night. Part of me is in pure disgust, but the other part of me is just like, wow, that's to put like a 5,000 calorie Scottish breakfast on top of 10 pints of lager and still keep going is true commitment.
Wait, was that not the end of the night?
No, he went on. I went home. Yeah, he kept going. So
Wow. That was just an intermission. That was a pit stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like pick up a quick 5,000 calories and keep going.
Oh, I didn't know this. No, this totally changes the evening.
Yeah.
Oh, what a pro.
It's nice for a bunch of random deep sea people to turn up in a totally random little bar in the middle of an old town like Edinburgh. It's good.
And that concludes this episode of the Deep Sea Podcast. If you would like to get in touch with us, then the email is in the show notes. And we'd really like it actually if you recorded some audio, because then we can play you on the show. So until we see your watery smiles again, we'll deep see you next time. And I miss you already. Iago Goplo Christ. I can't do it.
Iago Gopla Krishnani.
Thank you. Cipicola viridiplomi? Vividiplomi? Cipicola vividiplomi?
Viridiplomi.
Ah, that's probably better.
Cipicola viridiplomi.
Viridiplomi. Grimpatoothis. Feet. Oh, I'm so bad at this.
Fitiana.
Fitiana, thank you.
It cost me a day for them, isn't it?
For the names?
Yeah. He's getting hit with these big, massive land genesis. But anyway, yeah.
I just run out of the... I've forgotten the beginning by the time I'm halfway through, which is an issue.